Hi, I'm Ashley. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thank you for joining. Today I'm going to follow up on the previous video I did on Succession Season 3. I've watched the second episode and I'm going to follow up on some of the ideas I had from the first episode. If you haven't seen that video, you might want to go watch it. It might make more sense, but you may not need to. I'm going to try and be as detailed as I can, but I want this video to be a little bit faster. I'm going to try and get through it quickly, as much detail as I can. And if you need more, reference that first video. So if you haven't seen that video, I like to go into detail in what I see as the internal dynamics of the characters on the show and the family dynamics and what's embedded deep beneath some of their behavior and the unresolved issues that are dictating their behavior. I'm a therapist and I work from a psychoanalytic perspective, which means I just go as deeply into the unconscious mind as I can. So I sort of bring that knowledge to looking at these shows like Succession. If that sounds good to you, keep watching and let's get started. Also, it would really help me out if you could like and subscribe if you enjoy this content and want to see more. And I have notes that I'm gonna look at to get through this. The episode begins with Logan telling Roman that he needs to show his face for Logan, and keep Jerry close. So he's sort of sending Kendall out to do some of his bidding. Again, that hair. He's sort of hinting at the idea with Roman that he sees some future for him, like he'll get picked in the future, you know, that kind of thing. And it's just enough to dangle a carrot in front of Roman, which is constantly what Logan does. He's always using his children as pawns, as things, and he's always dangling a carrot with all of them. They kind of know that, and yet they persist because they want the power that he might give them. So on the off chance that they might get it, they go along with what he says, usually. Logan does ask Roman to not talk to the snake, Kendall. Kendall ends up doing it anyway, which is a good sign for the kids that, I mean, they all end up going to see Kendall as in this episode. And I would just want to go ahead and say, I think that is a really good sign of them thinking for themselves, at least. Logan is always the most important one and the most important one in power. And so it's kind of nice to see them think for themselves and go to see Kendall anyway, in spite of what their father wants them to do. And I would say perhaps, this is a very hopeful thing I'm about to say, not sure how true it is, but perhaps Kendall doing this has opened up space for the children to actually individuate in this family a little bit. Kendall pulled away enough and drew a line enough, even though he has his own like narcissistic and selfish reasons for doing it. He did separate himself from his father in a sense, and it has opened up space for someone like, for the rest of the kids to maybe think for themselves and what do they need, and not just what does dad want and need. The next scene I want to think about is Kendall and Greg, and Kendall saying, do we need to get you a lawyer? What do we need to do to make you feel better, essentially? And it makes me think like in the way that Kendall also behaves with his siblings later in the episode when they're all together and they piss him off and they sort of reject his offer to join his side. Kendall is like his father in the sense that he is nice to people to the extent that he needs them and can get ownership over them, or at least that's what he feels as ownership over them. And then he will be a dick. I mean, he'll turn the other way. It's sort of a Jekyll and Hyde. And so he keeps Greg close to the extent that he can, offers him a lawyer. And I'm sure if Greg pissed him off, he would turn the other direction and be a dick to him. So Kendall really has picked up a lot of that from his father. I do think there is a deeper core in Kendall that is wounded by his father, but it's like he thinks I don't know if he's like his father or if he's behaving like his father because that's all he knows to do. And that's what he has seen presented to him as a person who's in power. That's how that kind of person acts. I don't know if he knows any other way of doing it. So it's really unclear if Kendall himself is also a narcissist like his dad, or if that's just the only way he knows how to behave. It's complicated. So Roman goes to see Jerry dutifully. He does his part, what he says he'd do. They're both playing each other in a way and just sort of, playing some game. They seem to actually have some genuine like and affection for each other underneath it. They both do, but they are still playing a game with each other. Again, nothing in this world is direct. Everything is indirect. Everything is a game. No one can be like super direct and honest. I think because that's not the norm, and then it makes it very risky to do that. It also just feels lonely when I think about all of these characters, because they can't do that and they can't actually connect in any genuine way. It feels so lonely all the time. Each character feels so lonely to me. So Shiv goes to see Kendall at Kendall's ex's place, and Kendall ends up saying something to her like, he tells her she's angry because he did the right thing, like she never did, something like that. Oh, he tells her, I'm the real you. But I think he is totally going right into her Achilles heel, I think, because she has positioned, and I talked about this in my previous video, her whole niche is like that she's more liberal and she cares about things that other people don't care about, kind of. But is that really a deep feeling and deep concern for her about people? No, it's just I really do see it as a pretty superficial place for her to just have landed and to have a niche for herself within the family. And so for Kendall to say, I'm the real you, I think probably really gets at her, because no, that's her place. So you can't take my place. I think he might be right about that, because he had I want to say the balls, but I don't want to say balls, the balls to do it, but let's come up with something else. He just had the guts to do it. So, I mean, in a sense, Kendall gets to place himself as like the one who cares about people and the world, where previously that's been Shiv. Of course, it's all a game to Kendall. Kendall doesn't really care, I don't think, about any of that, but it's the role he gets to play now, and I bet it does bug her. Then there's a clip of Logan saying, we have to act. I'm stuck in quicksand. We have to act. And I think that's important for him because he is not someone that lets things happen to him. Remember, and this is what I talked about in a previous video too, he does not want to be weak. He rejects any feeling of weakness or vulnerability. And I think he did it from his childhood when he was so vulnerable to so many things, and he had an uncle who beat him physically. I think he has vowed to never feel like that again. So this is terrible for him and it's out of his control. So he wants to act on the world. He doesn't let the world act on him. Logan calls Connor and tries to smooth things. It's like he's wanting to keep Connor close. Logan's in this position of like trying to pull people in, just like Kendall is. He's trying to pull people into him and keep them close. So he says whatever he has to say. Of course, it's meaningless, but he calls Connor and tries to sort of smooth things out from what the horrible things he said to him on the yacht in the end of season 2. And I have not forgotten those horrible things. And so he tries to smooth it over with Connor, makes him seem like he cares, makes it seem like he cares. Oh, and he tells him, you're number one, kiddo, and bullshit. I mean, it's just bullshit. And it's hard to tell exactly how aware of Connor is all of that, but I think he is actually pretty aware of the game that's happening. And Connor says, Operation Thumb Twiddle, you bet. Is like he's saying, okay, yeah, Operation Thumb Twiddle, you bet. And it's kind of like Connor is on the joke. Connor is in on what's happening. He just doesn't like fight stuff too much, but he knows what's going on. And his position has been to stay safe by not really having a position. Shiv and Kendall are together, and then Roman comes up. And before Roman comes up, Shiv is showing some hesitation to letting Roman come up to join the conversation. And Kendall takes this as a moment to reassure her, like, you're the one I want. Roman might come up here, but you're the one I want. And it's the same stuff that Logan would do with all of them. Make them feel like the most important one is to keep them around. Now, do I think that Kendall is Shiv the most important to Kendall? I think so. She's the one he most wants. She's a woman. She's valuable in that way at this particular moment for them. So he wants her, but he's doing the same thing where it's like, make you feel wanted, make you feel needed to keep you around, make you dangle a carrot of power to try and keep you around. And it kind of works. It kind of mollifies her. I think what we see with Greg grappling with this, like, do I need a lawyer? Whose lawyer do I take? Where do I get a lawyer? How do I do this? We see him really grappling with it. And I think the role that Greg plays is he will show and express his confusion, his fear, his out of his depth feelings, whereas the rest of the kids won't dare show things like that. They won't show their vulnerabilities ever. So Greg gets to express that for all of them. And I think all of them feel a little like Greg, but he's the only one that would really express that. We see Lisa, the lawyer, I'm blanking on her last name right now. Lisa, the lawyer, Kendall's lawyer, wants some time with him, and he sort of dismisses her, and he's like, he did this whole thing last episode of like, I'll be your puppet, and pulling her in and saying whatever he needed to say to pull her in. And now that he's got her, he's sort of dismissive, and he's not really taking her seriously or her time seriously. So what happened to being her puppet? I love that again, and I said this from the last episode too, I love seeing Tom not take in Shiv's love wholesale. So they're on the phone, and she tells him she loves him, and he's sort of like, okay. And he doesn't take it in all the way. And that is so new for them. And that really throws Shiv off. Tom is her place to go, like, for a constant well of support. And so for him to be like not taking her in the same way, I think that really throws her. I don't know that she really cares about him and his well-being, but she cares about what he can do for her and the support he provides for her and the steadiness he provides for her and the non-threatening and non-competitive things he provides for her, non-competitive like dynamic he provides most of the time. And he's her safe place, and he's not so safe anymore. He's just not taking her shit in the same way. He's still showing care, but he's not taking her shit in the same way, and it throws her. I just think it's interesting because all the siblings treat the world and their partners and people around them like their father did, and I don't know if they'll ever learn their lesson. Will they ever stop just recreating the same treatment they've always had, the same world? Will they ever try anything else? And I think this is just a lesson for everyone. It's like, until you really look at your life and everything that's happened, you will just keep repeating the same things over and over. And so far, these kids just repeat the same ways of being in the world, the ways of being in relationships. So the siblings are all together, and here Kendall comes with the big sell. And actually, if you listen to him and he's talking about what they could do and what they could do with the company and the role they could take and turn their image around and all of that, I'm really sold on it watching it. And it's really compelling. And I imagine the kids feel that way too. They're a little bit swept up in it. But I think because they can also sense that Kendall is just another Logan and is acting like just another Logan in a lot of ways, they're not totally sold, and they don't want to offer themselves to him. It's like they end up kind of choosing to stick with the monster they know than the one that Kendall is presenting. I think they're really scared, and I think they're really scared at this point, and they're just trying to get out of this with power and as unscathed as possible, and they don't want to hand over power to Kendall. I think that is I think they're too competitive. They'd rather hand over loyalty to their dad than to Kendall. Also, I wanted to point out that, Shiv and Roman are not, their father does not want them to go see Kendall, but they kind of play it like he does. And so they don't want to tell Kendall why they're really there, that they might be interested. They don't want to tell their dad. So it's more of that indirectness, like everything is a game. It also is, they will not give up any motive at any time, any real self, not even to each other. Shiv and Roman kind of have the most playful relationship, but they won't be completely honest with each other all the time. It's still always like, I have to look out for myself, and everyone else is a potential enemy. When Roman and Kendall and Shiv are all together, before Connor gets there, they say, let's go into another room where it's more private. And so they go into Kendall's daughter's room, and Roman makes fun of Kendall for seeming to hesitate on his daughter's name. And I think this links back to the first episode too, where Kendall tries to tell Rava he wants to see her and the kids, and that's partly why he's there and he's shown up there. And it's really untrue. I mean, he does not care about those kids. And so Roman making that joke about Kendall is spot on, as Roman tends to do, because Kendall really probably doesn't think about his kids at all. I don't get that sense at all. And they go into her room, and Kendall says something about don't touch any of her shit. And that might sound like a protective thing, but I think if I'm thinking about it from his perspective, he really doesn't, I don't think he feels particularly connected to her and like protecting her. I think she's just an extension of him, and it's like, don't touch my stuff, is more what he's saying. We see Greg go to Uncle Ewan, but it's his grandfather. He keeps going back to him, even though he's really unkind to him and doesn't seem to care about Greg at all as a person. Ewan acts just like Logan, just on the opposite side of the political spectrum. Just the same stuff, different day. Greg goes to him again, much like the siblings do with Logan. They all keep going back to the same well, even though it's a dry well, for something they will never really get, which is like, please care for me, please help me. And they never actually really get the nurturing they're going for. And on that note, it's like, why do the kids never protect themselves? And why does Greg not protect himself from his grandfather? It's like all of this poor treatment from others, and no one protects themselves, and everyone keeps going back for more. And that, I just want to say, is a sign of trauma, because in trauma that hasn't been processed, it's sort of like somewhere in the back of their minds that this is toxic, but they keep going back for more. No one ever really sets a boundary or a limit for themselves. It's probably really scary in that family to do something like that, but no one ever does it. Connor shows up to the sibling gathering, and I think again we see that he knows, and this is what I talked about in the first episode, he knows more than he lets on. He knows what's up, but he just doesn't take a stance. And there's a moment where they act like they're here for Dad, like Roman and Shiv act like they're here for Logan at the meeting for Logan. And Connor says something like, sure, we're all here for Dad. Like, he knows what's happening. He knows the game. And in the episode, as you're watching it, or as I was watching it, it felt like a refreshing bit of groundedness and realness that we just never get from anybody. And just another note about Kendall's sell of where he could take the company. You know, I'm sold. Like, great, take it in that direction. And I think the kids might feel that way on some level too. But then you see when they say, no, I'm not going to do it. And he has such like hatred coming out of him, and it's such vile like comments for everyone, that you see that like it's not really that he cares deeply about how people are affected or people are affected by the company. That's not really what he feels. It's just an angle for him. The siblings are kind of in a position of like, what's the lesser of two evils here? What are the options here? There's a moment when Shiv is really cruel to Roman and how he doesn't have sex with people. He walks out of the room and Connor goes to get him, comes back with him. Shiv apologizes, and Roman says, I mean, he essentially like says it's okay. Like, oh, I wasn't upset about that. I was just going to the bathroom. It's the same thing that he does with Logan when Logan has hit him or hurt him. He makes it okay for Logan, and they all do that. Like, Logan sort of apologizes, and they make it okay for him. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's fine. One, I think that is a sign that like no one can be vulnerable and like give up their position and say, yeah, that hurt me. Thank you for saying sorry. Also, they're so scared of the other that they want to make it okay for them and protect their feelings by not being too upset about it. Does that make sense? Am I making that clear enough? We see Logan and Marcia together. She's manipulating him, touching his arm. I think she knows how to manipulate him, and that's great. I'm all for it. Use what you have. The siblings are back to debating whether or not they knew these things about these creepy old men in the house when they were younger, and Connor and Kendall knew, and the younger two, Shiv and Roman, are saying they didn't. And Connor and Kendall probably were old enough to understand what was happening about these men, or with these men. But I think there is a collective ignoring in a family like that of some of that behavior and the bad behavior. And I think sometimes in the world of wealth and money too, there's a collective ignoring of the things you just don't want to deal with, because you kind of don't have to when you have that much money. You can kind of just have whatever world you want and live in whatever world you want. And you kind of see this if you've ever seen Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, you kind of see this with someone like Kathy Hilton, who has a crazy amount of money, and she can really live her life oblivious to anything she doesn't want to feel or think about. I mean, the interesting thing is that the kids really do seem to have an opening here laid at their feet to like do something different with the company and to take power in a different way, and they aren't taking it as of yet. They still opt, in it seems, to be under their father's control and under his way of doing things. You know, Shiv wants power, Roman wants power. Will they get it with Kendall? Will they get it with their dad? I think they don't know. And I think all they can think about is power and their position. And if you notice, it's just very little of them thinking about like, what do I need to feel happy? What will fulfill me in this life? What makes sense for me in my life? What do I want going forward? They don't even think about that. It's just like a one-track mind. The only thing they've ever seen laid out for them is power and money, and so that's what they're after. There's not like a self-actualizing journey for them. I felt such pain when Connor said he was out and Kendall says horrible things to him and says, get out, you're not wanted anyway. And Roman says as if he hasn't heard that enough in his life. And I think, well, exactly. It's so painful. Connor is treated as though he's unwanted all the time and unimportant all the time, and as though what he thinks isn't important, and that's how he treats himself. And this, I talked about this again in the previous episode, but it's just painful. It kills me to watch it. Ugh. It makes me hate Kendall, that he'd be willing to hurt people like that. And that's what you see with Kendall, is that he's willing to hurt people, and they all are. They're willing to hurt people around them. Like, it's crazy how they're willing to hurt people, but I think they're so desensitized and cut off from their own hurt and their own pain that they don't connect to what they do to other people. I do think Kendall could have won the kids over if he were not taking the same exact approach as his dad. If he had done it a little differently, made more space for them, more talk about collaborating, sharing power, something, I think he could have had more appeal with them, but he doesn't do that. Greg is used by his uncle and this new lawyer, his uncle's lawyer person. And it's not about caring for Greg, it's just about using Greg, and that is just like Logan. So Ewan is no better than Logan, even though they hate each other. They seem to hate each other. He's no better, no different. At the end, we see Logan and Shiv in a car together, and Logan again is luring her with power and like dangling a carrot, pulling her in. She is wooed by it because she wants it. Although I think she also knows that it's a game, but she still wants it. So she's going to go along with it. And this is what happens a lot among siblings that are traumatized, or a traumatized child with a parent. You keep going along thinking, and this is all the siblings on this show, you keep going along thinking, if I do this, X, Y, or Z, I'll get X, Y, or Z. If I just do this and play along and go along with this or that, I'll get what I want. And it's a fantasy. It never works. It never, ever works for them. They never get the thing they're after, which is really just love and approval. They never, ever, ever get it. They want to be picked. They want to be loved. They want approval. And they never get it, yet they keep going after it, even though all the evidence indicates they will never get it. So that is being stuck in a traumatized place. And we all might relate to that on some level. So I just present all of that as like stuff to think about. Let me know what you think, what I missed, what else you'd like me to talk about. And I will see you next time. Thank you for joining me if you've gotten this far. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. And I hope to see you next time. Bye.